Hello and welcome to week 10. We are in the second to last week of our quarter. We are also newly into social work month, so happy social work month to us all. I mentioned this in an announcement, but just wanted to highlight that I did initially have this week on the syllabus as focusing on spirituality, religion, and faith-based organizations. And I just realized that I have one less week than I thought I did. So we are going to go ahead and not cover that material. If folks are interested in that material, I think that's a great option for your mini project. Or if you wanted to, there will be a little space in the discussion board where you can talk briefly about that sort of work if you want to, but we will not be covering that chapter in this course. So I'm going to keep this video pretty brief. I think my goal for this week is to keep things a little on the lighter side. I'm aware that we, like I said, are almost done with this course, and I imagine that you have other classes that have formal final exams or larger presentations, and so I do want to take it a little easy if we can, while still feeling like we're absorbing some information. I think this chapter is pretty digestible. If you disagree and have lots of questions, feel free to let me know. But this is much broader information. It's not as nuanced, it's not as specific. So I'm hoping that the material can really speak for itself. I'm just going to highlight a couple things, and then I will, in this little micro lecture, I will address just a couple grading things to make sure that people are getting the information in different areas. And so that hopefully makes sense to everyone. So please, if you're curious about grading, please watch this all the way until the end. I'll try to keep it short. The only things I really want to highlight from the material are really drawing that distinction between the different sort of spheres of human services practice. So we've got our macro level practice, which is what we're focusing on in this chapter. This is your higher level advocacy, your policy work. This is for those people who want to work in a really broad system that impacts change for a lot of people. This is like your government advocacy, working in sort of a pack of organizations that maybe, all sit on the same, I don't have the right word for it in my head, but almost like a group of agencies. You'll see this in areas where we're trying to better develop our policy. An example of this might be, in human trafficking work. I know I have colleagues at the hospital who are engaged in this much more macro level work with lots of organizations from around the area, and they go to meetings and they try to figure out how they can all work together to impact these much larger issues. That's macro work. Micro work, which is, we're going to skip a tier for now, kind of the bottom, is mostly what we've been talking about this quarter. That's that one-on-one practice. We think about counseling and direct case management with like a single person. That is really your micro level practice. It's kind of the not smallest in terms of impact, but smallest in terms of the population that you're working with. This is your counseling. This is your case management. This is one-to-one. You are one person, they are one person. You are working together. And then we do have a third tier, which falls in between those two, which is our meso-level human services work. And this tier, I think, is a little harder to explain, but I think is ultimately where a lot of work falls. I did a little Googling on this myself and would encourage folks to Google it if the way I'm describing it doesn't make sense. Meso-level practice is really kind of anything in between those two. This might be where you're working with a family or a support group type setting, or could be where you're doing any sort of programmatic work within a larger organization. So I think about, a program manager. I'll use my own work as an example, a program manager for a food bank, which is located within a hospital. That might be meso-level practice. But then you also have people doing work a little bit more like what I do, where you're working with entire families, you're working with entire teams providing a resource. And there is still that one-on-one work where we get kind of a little bit of going in between these two tiers, but there's also this sort of mid-range systems work. So where we're working with a school, we're working with a hospital, and sort of dipping in between that direct service, but then also that larger practice that's going to impact more than just that one individual. I hope that makes sense. I don't believe there's any questions on the quiz, which you'll take next week, on meso-level practice, because I don't know that it's really covered in the book that much, but I wanted to throw it out there because I think it's important, because there's such a big gap between micro-level practice and macro-level that we want to make sure we're covering where a lot of this work lives. The second topic I wanted to make sure I touched on is really this idea of ethics within human services. I think there's sort of two things that we think about as we're making ethical decisions in this work. We have our professional ethics, which will vary based on the type of role that you go into or the type of license degree that you choose to pursue. A lot of them have very similar ethics, but it is really important that you know as a professional, whether you're a social worker, a mental health counselor, a nurse, a phlebotomist, whatever, that you know what your profession's code of ethics is. And then you're also going to have your personal ethics. I think in a lot of cases, our personal ethics align pretty closely with the professional ethics of the field we choose to go in, but that's not always going to be the case. And this is really important for us to be mindful of this and do some work here. I definitely have colleagues who have, personal ethics that might be a little bit different when it comes to some of the systems that we have to work with. I have colleagues who are really not interested in partnering with law enforcement, but that is something that, based on their professional role and the specific ethics of a certain situation that maybe they have to do. And so there is some juggling there when we are working in this field. So in these instances where we have these ethical dilemmas, it's really important to be seeking supervision, which is essentially talking to the person above you, and kind of fleshing out the meat of a case, of a situation, and getting some guidance from someone who's usually been in the field a little longer and who might have more professional insight than you do. And then seeking consultation with peers, other resources. I, again, will use myself as an example. I'm very lucky to work in a very robust system. So if I'm at work and I have an ethical dilemma, I have our bioethics team, which is kind of medical ethics, that I can consult with. I have our Center for Health Outcomes that focuses more on issues of diversity and institutional racism. I have colleagues I can consult with. I have all these different options. And even if you're working in a setting where your institutional options aren't that robust, it's really important to be seeking out that consultation when you're kind of not sure what to do. Because sometimes even just having a colleague who's outside of the situation talk it through with you can really help illuminate things you're missing, some biases that are showing up for you that you may or may not be aware of. And it's just really important to not operate within a vacuum, both for your own peace of mind, but then also for the people you're serving. A few areas, some of which we've already talked about, where we may have an ethical dilemma, but our options are somewhat more limited, are these areas where we have kind of a legal obligation. So we've talked about mandated reporting of child abuse and abuse of vulnerable adults. Another area where you sometimes see this is in terms of public health. There are certain, medical diagnoses or issues that do need to be reported from a public health standpoint. I believe it's slipping my mind right now, but I know there are certain diagnoses where, like, if you go to the emergency room and you're found to have, I don't know, let's say like Ebola, that has to get escalated to authorities for the kind of the greater good. And then the third of these, which is mentioned in the book, is that idea of duty to warn. You'll hear people call that terrace off, which is really that if you're working in a mental health capacity and if someone discloses to you that they have a plan of harming someone else, that you are obligated to inform both that person and legal authorities. You can read more about that case if you want. It is pretty upsetting, but it's a very clear line between that case and where that ruling came from. So that is all I want to say about the chapter. I know I said I'd keep this short and I haven't done that. So just a couple quick things about grades and then I'll let you get on with the work. You will notice that this week's discussion board is much lighter than the last ones from the whole quarter. That is intentional. Initially, it was going to be a more robust discussion board, but based on kind of how and what I've heard from people throughout the quarter, I am a little concerned that folks are maybe going to be feeling a bit overwhelmed at this point. So I am just going to keep it much lighter. This will all be written in the discussion post, but you're basically just going to pick a job from each of these tiers that you would be interested in doing, and maybe like a quick sentence about why. And then in your responses to your classmates, you'll still do two. You will pick one of the jobs that they mentioned and you'll say, yes, I agree, no, I don't, and here's why. And then that's it. You're going to get the same amount of points, but please don't just post yes or no one word answers. Give me like a sentence, give me something to work with. But I do want to give people the opportunity to have kind of a low pressure way to catch up on some points while still engaging with the material. And then the last thing is the quiz. The third quiz was supposed to be this week. I did go ahead and move that into the finals module, which should also be posted by the time you all are seeing this, just to give you extra time. The due date for that quiz is going to be the last day of the quarter. So I will not be able to extend that if you miss it. Not just I don't want to, I will not be able to because the class will be closed. If you all are reaching out to me at this point about extensions, things like that, I'm going to be really limited on where I'm going to be able to say yes, because we are getting to the point where your grades are due very soon after this quarter wraps up. So hopefully that's not happening a lot, but if it is, I'm very limited on what I can do right now. But of course, if something comes up that you think is kind of outside of the realm of just, oh, I forgot to do this, please let me know. Again, apologies, this is not a short lecture like I wanted it to be, but it is done now and I will let you get on with the material.